Olive is a little child who aspires to be the Little Miss Sunshine winner. Richard Olive's father is seldom on speaking terms with his father and is a failure as a motivational speaker. After an unfortunate romance with a male doctoral student, Olive's uncle Frank, a well known Proust researcher, committed suicide. As a fervent Nietzschean, her brother Dwayne has vowed to remain silent, which helps him distance himself from the family that haunts him. Additionally, Olive's grandfather is a drug addict and a ne'er do well, but at least he passionately coaches Olive in her talent routine for contests. They forget Olive in petrol station. The band breaks down and Richard discovers his book won't be published. Even though the pageant doesn't exactly go as planned, they manage to bring Olive to the event on the time despite encountering grief. Did they finally make it? What was Olive's performance? How her dance performance healed dysfunctional family dynamics and patched them together? Let's watch the movie recap of Little Miss Sunshine. Welcome to Movie Spotlight. Olive, a 7-year-old with ordinary looks and spectacles, is not your usual pageant type but loves pageant work. Her father, Richard, aspires to be a life coach and motivational speaker. Olive's brother Dwayne has been adhering to a vow of silence for the past 9 months and intends to continue until he enlists in the Air Force. Grandpa Edwin was expelled from his retirement home for selling and using heroin, which he still enjoys. Cheryl visits the hospital and brings her brother Frank home after saving him from his suicidal attempt. Cheryl Hoover resides in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and is the mother of two children, Dwayne and Olive. Cheryl's adolescent son from a previous marriage, Dwayne, reads Nietzsche. He mentions to Frank that he hates his whole family. It is disclosed over a tense and uncomfortable family meal that Frank, a famous Marcel Proust researcher and gay professor, attempted suicide after a romantic partner left him for a rival academic. Olive informs the family about the beauty pageant routine she is practicing with her grandfather's assistance after her father signals her to shift the topic and has placed second in the regional competition. Olive's aunt calls the family over dinner to let them know that Olive has a spot in the Little Miss Sunshine pageant, which will be held in Redondo Beach, California, and that the winner of Olive's most recent pageant had to forfeit. The entire family goes since Frank and Dwayne can't be left alone, and Richard, Cheryl, and Edwin want to help her. Olive is ecstatic, and after some debate regarding transportation, and a coercive motivational speech from her self help group father, Richard. The whole family decides to go to Redondo Beach by taking their yellow Volkswagen van on a road trip of 800 miles, that is 1300 kilometers, due to budgetary restrictions. Dwayne ignores his quarreling parents and grandpa's brash sex counsel in favor of reading Friedrich Nietzsche's writing. Throughout the journey, family conflicts arise despite the aging van's technical issues. The family discovers that when the van breaks down early on, they must push it until it runs at roughly 32 km per hour before placing it into gear. After that, they must dash to the side door and get in. Richard loses a big deal that would have boosted his motivational business. Grandpa asks Frank to buy some nasty books for him. When Frank purchases those, he bumps into his ex lover Larry Sugarman in a convenience store. Frank feels ashamed. The family gets back on the road all in a foul mood, but when Dwayne notices, they realize they must go back to the petrol station for Olive, whom they had forgotten in their rage. Even though they have not been on good terms for years, Richard is still consoled by his father Edwin. They spend the entire night at a motel with Grandpa and Olive staying in one room, Frank and Dwayne in another, and Richard and Cheryl in the third. The adoring Grandpa Edwin assures Olive that she is a beautiful person who will blow him out of the water after she confides in Grandpa that she is terrified about the pageant the next day. After a heated disagreement with Cheryl on the botched book sale, Richard makes the late night trip to Scottsdale to face his business partner, Stan Grossman. After having his ideas turned down again, Richard turns to the motel. Olive wakes her parents in the morning because Grandpa won't wake up. After being taken to the hospital, Edwin is declared dead from what appears to be heroin overdose. The family is devastated, but the papers they must complete will make it impossible for them to arrive at Olive's pageant in time. When the grief counselor refuses to allow the family to leave his body at the hospital while they attend the pageant and return later, they decide to smuggle it into the van. Richard and his family steal and hide the body in their van because he is determined to pay tribute to his father. However, their horn soon breaks and continues to honk. A state officer pulls them over and almost finds Edwin's body in the trunk but is distracted by Grandpa's falling pawn magazine collection. When he realizes the family in return for the pawn magazines, the automobile trip continues. The Hoovers are having a terrific time and are almost at the patient's side. Frank discovers that Dwayne is colorblind while Olive administers an eye test she obtained from the hospital. Dwayne loses it when he realizes this destroys his dream of becoming a pilot and makes his 9 months of complete stillness is meaningless. In his wrath, Dwayne insults his family by running into a culvert after Richard stops the bus. When he refuses to continue the journey and is not reassured by Cheryl, Olive can get him back on the board with a silent hug. They are 4 minutes late to the sign up booth and arrive at the Redento Suites Hotel with a lot of parking confusion. After a snarky pageant official first denies her admittance, Olive is added to the lineup by a friendly staff member. Olive asks last year's Miss California whether she eats ice cream, and she replies that she loves it. Frank notices Larry Sugarman's understanding proofed book ad in the newspaper and gets irritated. Frank and Dwayne leave for a pier, disgusted by the surreal ambience of the child pageant. The staff asks for a song on the CD for which Olive is going to perform. When she hands it over, he doubtfully asks, "Are you the one who chose the song?" She replies that it was her grandpa. Richard regretfully says goodbye to his father and locates an undertaking firm to remove Edwin's body. Prepubescent competitors, heavily covered in makeup and false tanning, take the stage as a pageant gets underway. Now outspoken again, Dwayne vents his displeasure with his adolescence and life. Frank shares with his nephew a quote from Proust that says your pain rather than your enjoyment defines your identity. As he observes from the crowd, Richard worries about Olive since he knows she won't fit in. Concerned about the same thing, he and Dwayne walk backstage to persuade Cheryl to cancel. Defiant, Cheryl insists that they must let Olive be Olive. As Olive is escorted to the stage to perform, the family looks on anxiously. Olive dedicates her dancing performance to Grandpa, who choreographed it while wearing a suit and top hat. The rest of the family has not yet seen it. Since Olive is unaware of the racy implications of Rick James' super freak, her dance turns out to be a strip burlesque routine which she executes with gusto. Despite the outrage and even catcalling from the audience, the Hoovers support her. Richard starts dancing behind his daughter to help her as the snarky pageant official tells the MC to take Olive off the stage. Olive's family takes the stage individually and joins her in enthusiastically finishing the song. The Hoovers are allowed to depart after a quick stop at the police precinct, provided that Olive never competes in another beauty pageant in California. The Hoovers push start the microbus again and pile on, having grown closer and more assured over the journey. They return to Albuquerque by car as the sun sets.